1819 infamous case of McCulloch versus Maryland is the first of the 15 mandatory cases that you'll need to know this year. And it's the first of two federalism related cases that we'll go over in this chapter. So, the main sort of dispute in this case involves the national government's attempt to open up a branch of the national bank within the state of Maryland. So, back then, banks were sort of managed by the government and run by the government, not necessarily like the private banks that exist today. So you got to think of the banks being a little bit different, is that most of them were run by the government. So the national government wants to open up a branch of the national bank within the state of Maryland. Well, Maryland vehemently objects and opposes this. Number one, because it's going to be competition for like state banks. And number two, because they think that this is like an unconstitutional use of sort of like the government's power, like the national government's power. And one of their major complaints is that if you go back to Article 1, Section 8, which is the enumerated section of the Constitution, the enumerated clause, where it lists all the things that the government can do, the national government, all the things that Congress can do, the word bank is not listed anywhere within this list. So the states kind of look at this as like, well, if it's not listed, like you can't do it. And the powers are supposed to be reserved to us that are unstated. However, the national government's response is that because of the necessary and proper clause, you can do more than what's like specifically listed within the Constitution. So when you talked about sort of the significance of that clause before, their argument is that one of the stated powers in the Constitution, like the Commerce Clause, right, is the fact that they can regulate commerce among the different states and like sort of like regulate the economy. And to them, by linking up the necessary and proper clause and a bank with something that is stated in the Constitution, the ability to regulate commerce or the economy, they feel like they're justified in sort of like creating this bank. So there's a difference in opinion between the national government and the state government on how to sort of interpret Article 1, Section 8. Maryland does not wait for the courts to sort of intervene. They take matters into their own hands, and they begin to excessively tax this branch of the national government bank, hoping to sort of like force it to close. The sort of manager of the national bank branch in Maryland, James McCulloch, sues, saying that states don't have the power to actually tax something that involves like the national government. So that's the background of the dispute that like sort of deals with the national government's creation of this national bank branch in the state of Maryland. All right. So here's the constitutional connection, right? And this is the part of the Constitution that sort of like this case like deals with. And that's something that you're always going to have to be able to like know involving these cases. So the first question, can the national government create a national bank if it's not specifically listed in the Constitution? Well, like what part of the Constitution involves this sort of question in this part of the dispute? Well, that's definitely the two clauses that we talked about, sort of the necessary and proper clause, and then sort of like linking it up to the Commerce Clause. So that's the part of the Constitution involved with the first part of this dispute. The second part of the dispute, can the state government actually tax something that belongs to the national government? That involves the Supremacy Clause. So there are a couple different clauses that sort of from the Constitution connect directly to the disputes in this case. So what's the decision and the outcome of the Supreme Court? And again, at this time, the court is led by John Marshall, and most of the Marshall court decisions tend to benefit a stronger national government. So it's actually 7-0 unanimous in both questions. So the first question, can the national government create a national bank if it's not specifically listed in the Constitution? Unanimously, the Supreme Court says yes, that the necessary and proper clause can be used to sort of do more than what's listed in the Constitution. And as long as you can sort of make a direct connection to something that is listed in the document, you can generally do something that's not listed specifically in the document. And in this case, they said that opening a bank was close enough to something that was written in the Constitution, which is regulating the economy or commerce. So they said it's justifiable. So the bank could be created by the national government. Secondly, they unanimously said that the state of Maryland could not tax the national government's branch of a bank within the state of Maryland. Because when you tax somebody, you are indicating control over them. And that because of the supremacy clause in the Constitution, the states obviously aren't supreme to the national government. The national government is supreme to the states. So the national government can tax the states because of that clause, but the states can't tax the national government. So that's how the court decides the two questions sort of in this case. The ultimate significance of the ruling is as follows. So we'll do the second question first. The ruling that said that states can't tax the national government. Like, why is that important? Why is that significant? I mean, it basically just reinforces the idea of the supremacy clause that the national government sort of is supreme over the states. Again, the national government can tax the states because it's supreme, but the states can't tax the national government because the states aren't sort of like overseeing the national government. The more significant part of this case involves really what was the first question: the fact that the national government can create a bank even though it's not listed in the Constitution. Because this is the first time that the court really sort of like legalizes the use of the necessary and proper clause. And what this does is it dramatically expands the power of the national government. And it allows it to do a lot more than what's listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. From this point forward, essentially, as long as the national government can link up what it wants to do with something that is in Article 1, Section 8, 99 times out of 100, the Supreme Court has established the precedent through this case that they'll be able to do that. This is significant because it is now sort of going sort of against what the model of the original Constitution was supposed to be, which is like if it's listed in the document, national government gets to do it. Anything that's not listed in the document automatically is a state power. Well, this kind of changes that philosophy. This now allows the national government to do a lot more than what's listed in the Constitution, as long as it links it up to something that is in the Constitution. And that's the significance of that necessary and proper clause. And again, most times the easiest like enumerated power in Article 1, Section 8 to link up what they want to do with is the Commerce Clause, because commerce in the economy is so broad.